here we are. We got the 2019 Trek Slash Slash 8. So it's the alloy model. I'm not too sure if it's a top alloy model. I've got to double check that. But for $4,500, this thing's a rig for sure. So that's regular recommended retail. Comes with a RockShox Yari at the front with the new debonair spring. I went over the finer details in the initial impressions. Obviously 29-inch wheels, Bontrager wheels. These Bontrager tyres, they're alright. I can charge on them. I was obviously charging pretty hard on them, but yeah, not a lot of trust there. Not as much trust as I'd hoped for. But they are still good. They roll extremely fast for the speed that they roll. There's a lot of grip there for sure. So it's not a necessity to chuck them in the bin or swap them out. They still do a good job. But for me, I'd go a Minion, either a Max Terra or a Max Grip at the front, and either a Max Terra or just a dual compound at the back. The Eagle GX drivetrain, flawless. Sram guide brakes. I reckon I said it before, I reckon there's organic pads in here that just don't quite have that stopping power as the metallic pads do. So I run the guides, I've run guides for ages. They've got enough power to stop me. And this just felt like I was a little bit overwhelmed in the braking, especially in the front. So when you got a rig that goes this quick, this is definitely it. I don't know about just going quick, but the momentum that these things hold, it's just ridiculous. Once you get up to speed, or as soon as you get it off the line, it just feels like it wants to go. It wants to go and carry speed everywhere, coming out of stuff. It's really, really firm to pump off of. It's got that reactive shock in the rear. Didn't really find the bottom, I don't think. I'm just ever so slightly off the bottom out marker on the shock, on the stanchion there. So I didn't bottom it out at all. I ended up settling with 170 PSI in the shock, so I'm about 174 kitted up. I'm about 74 kilos kitted up. I started at 175. It's a little bit stout. It was still good, but a little bit stout. Climbs like a demon. No problem climbing whatsoever on this thing. It's just super efficient. The dropper's good, but getting it back down is quite a... You wouldn't want to get it down in a hurry. If you put pressure on the front, it's alright, but your butt's always on the back, and when you're putting pressure on the back there, it really doesn't want to come down. So you've got to put the pressure on the front of the seat. Minor issue, that might wear in with time. There's no play there, there's no vertical play, which is good. I had a few dramas, or not a few dramas, but a couple of dramas with my Bontrager seat post with vertical play, a lot of vertical play, so there was a lot of shuddering and rattling, pretty much from new. These ones don't do it at all. They warranted it for me, so it wasn't an issue. Bontrager Trek are really good with warranty from what I've seen. The Yari fork, which was a bit of a highlight for me on this bike. So I got on it, it was set up at 85 PSI, I left it at 85 PSI. I haven't opened them up yet to see what kind of spaces are in there, how many spaces. I'm fairly sure they come with two. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm fairly sure they come with two spaces. It's either one or two. This debonair spring, it's got the basic Yari motion control damper. I think it's the motion control damper. And it's just so smooth off the top. It's so good. This new air spring has made the world of difference to all these RockShox forks. I run the Vorsprung Luftkapper in my forks, which is very much similar. But these things, there's no friction. They talk about the minimal friction with that new spring, and there literally is no, there's nothing there. There's no friction. They're so smooth. I started with 3 clicks of compression. I went back to 2 clicks on my first run. Just felt like I could get a little bit more out of it with 2 clicks. Once I got up to speed, I needed to go back to that 3 clicks, and that was it. 4 clicks, a little bit much, but 3 clicks was really, really good. Hard charging. You can see in the video, they're getting a workout, and they just feel calm. Through the entire ride, everywhere I threw them, everywhere I pointed this bike, the fork felt calm. The front end tracked really well. 29er. having a 29er, I've ridden 3 29ers now, demo, you know, giving them all a fairly good beating. So the Norco Range 29er 2018, the Scott Genius 29er 2018, and both of them left me feeling like that back wheel is just trying to push me over the front. It really felt like that. Kind of a hard feeling to describe, but I always feel like I'm a little bit too small for a 29er. This thing is a 19.5 frame, so it's there. They consider it a large. It's definitely not as large as, say, the Giant Rain, the new models of Giant Rain, the 2018 onwards. My Remedy is a 18.5, so one size smaller, which is considered their medium. It's a little bit short for me, I'm 174 centimeters tall. This thing feels like the perfect size for me. It's not too big. Wheelbase doesn't really feel too long. Easy to adapt to. I got on it, and first run felt good. I went back to the car, dropped the PSI in the shock a little bit, sped the rebound up a little bit, and then I ended up going back and forth with the rebound and found a good middle ground. So it's not fast. It's not how I'd usually run it. It's a little bit slower. I think having a bigger wheel, there's a lot more going on at the back there, so you got to calm it down a little bit with that rebound. But it's still smooth. It still feels smooth. So set that up a little slower than I'd usually set it. 170 psi. I'd almost like to go, and that sits me at just over 30% sag. Like I said, I never really hit the bottom out, and I took some pretty hard hits on it. I'd like to go another spacer. I'm assuming there's 2 in there. That's usually where they come out standard. So I'd like to put a 3rd spacer in there and maybe drop that pressure a little bit more so it sits in a little bit more, but still has that efficiency and the resistance to bottom out. I think this would be really good with another spacer in it. The momentum it carries is all the rough stuff, all the choppy stuff. You just point it, and there's something about these 29ers, especially this bike, not so much the other ones. Maybe I wasn't adapted as well, but I did spend a couple of days on each of those other 2 bikes. But this thing, if you look at a line around a corner or around through a rough section or a rough turn or whatever, you draw a line with your eyes coming into it, and it just gives me the confidence that I know it's going to go on that line, regardless of what the rocks are doing or the rough stuff's doing. It's going to follow that line around. It's actually quite impressive. It got me quite excited. Long cranks, easy to climb with, but I don't like changing direction and changing, you know, the positions of my feet with the long cranks. There's just too much work to do there. The shorter cranks are much better, but definitely climbing with that leverage easier on the long cranks. So I'd go on this bike, I'd go 170. I run the 165s on my bike. My next bike I'll probably get 170 cranks just to have that happy medium of the climbing and the acceleration and freedom of movement with the shorter crank. The thing is it's just a sled. It's not plush in the rear. I wouldn't say it's plush, but it's certainly planted, and it certainly goes where you want it to go. So I've got my Remedy feeling quite plush to a point. I run it at the stiffer end of compliance. So when you're setting your suspension up, to me, if you want a bike that's racy and fast, you want to try and find the stiffest compliance setup you can find. So you've got a little window of compliance where, you know, soft. If you go too soft, it's not really compliant anymore. It gets overwhelmed in the rough. You start to firm it up, and then you hit that optimal compliance, and you go firmer and firmer and firmer, and then it'll get so firm that it's no longer compliant. So that's kind of more for another video. But this thing at that stiff end of compliance, it's planted, it's fast, it's super efficient. This reactive stuff, and it's the same on my old Trek. When I went from the Deluxe with the reactive to the Super Deluxe without the reactive, I definitely noticed the lack of efficiency that came with not having the reactive down there. It's super efficient in everything that you do, pumping, everything, and as soon as that rough stuff hits, that efficiency disappears and it just eats it up, gobbles it up. So, like I said, it's not super plush, but it is planted, it is controlled, it feels really good, and most of all, it feels extremely fast. So it needs better brake pads for sure. If you're going to have a bike that allows you to get up to speed that quickly and kind of do those kinds of speeds over the rough stuff, you're going to want either better brakes or just better brake pads. I'd go better brake pads. You got a 180 disc on the back, 200 on the front. I'd just go metallic pads front and back, and then ignore it. Don't stress if you're looking at getting a bike like this, and your budget's kind of around here, and you're thinking, oh, but I want the lyric fork and blah blah blah. Don't worry about it. This damping system does more than enough. The spring is what changes these forks the most. So, super impressed with the forks. If I had this bike, I wouldn't change the forks. I'd leave it exactly as is. Maybe do a bit of fine tuning, see if you can get some more out of it. But it was ploughing. It was absolutely ploughing. The wheels are good. The hubs are good. I've had Bonte hubs on my bike. They're really good. I actually went back to the Bontrager hubs from the EX, the DT Swiss 350 hubs. Not a big fan of that. They are okay, but I'm not a big fan of them. Bonte's roll better, and you can set them up a bit quieter. And yeah, overall, very impressed for sure. I'm not sure what it weighs. It doesn't feel heavy. As soon as I got on it, it felt playful. It didn't feel cumbersome. Didn't feel like it was. It didn't feel like a 29. It didn't feel like it was out of sorts. It didn't feel like it was something that I was going to take a long time to get used to. The first corner I hit, I was already at home. I thought, it can't be this easy, surely. And threw a couple of laps down. I should have really done a helmet cam video just to show you how much stoke I had on the way down. And it's exciting, and it's almost a bit scary. It's easy to get not out of control. It's easy to get faster than you're used to. It's easy to get this thing going faster than you're used to. So you need the good brakes, and you need to have it set up right. So like I said, another spacer in the shock, and keep it down 30% or more. So 30 to 32, 33% sag, and that sag set up like that. So not standing and trying to get a balance on a wall or anything like that, just sitting sag. It's the best way to do it in my opinion. And the front is at just over 20%. It's about 21% sag, and that's rolling. That's kind of the only way I can set the sag up is roll around, get in a good position, bounce around, and then kind of in your balanced position, lean in, roll the rubber ring down, then lean back, jump off gently, and yeah, 20%-ish there. So 85 PSI in the front, 170 in the back, the Sync motors. So if you like them, get into Bicycle Express, or I think Bicycle Fix in Woodside will probably have a demo as well. But I got this from Bicycle Express, so thanks a lot to them boys. This bike's a weapon, and I'm sure they're going to sell like hotcakes. So get in and demo one. You can't